He's got the whole world in his hands, not just a hand people, but everybody. All of those things. So I'm going to leave you with, I'm not going to leave because we got Q&A, but I want to share with you a song that I wrote called Cotton and the Cross, because we're talking about this intersection between religion and music and culture and racism. And I wrote this song because I wanted to write a love letter to my folks. You know, because we are tied, you know, as Dr. King says, we are bound up in a inextricable web of mutuality. Baha'u'llah says, know ye not why we created you all from the same dust, so that no one would exalt themselves over the other. Ponder at all time in your heart how you were created. And he says that if you understand this, you will understand why it behooves you to walk with the same feet, eat with the same mouth, and dwell in the same land. That's what oneness is. And this music has always captured that spirit from the very, very beginning. You know, as our dear sister Maya Angelou said, that, you know, we are the hope and dream of the slave. When you hear that music, you hear their hopes and dreams, and you know that that's what they were hoping for. They were hoping for this world, for these people, for all of us to come together and acknowledge this. And who better to teach you about injustice than someone who has been on the underside of it? So here we go. Cotton and the Cross. You and me and you together. Southern born, Southern.
Sorry, I'm not sure. I had it buffering for a long time. I'm not sure why it's. Always something. Let me stop sharing and see if I can refresh it.
Sometimes if you back it up, it'll catch up to itself.
Also, if you have it downloaded, then you could just play it from the download instead of from.
Southern born, Southern bred, but still far apart. Bound in blood and sacred song, still we don't see each other, 'cause we're living beneath the shadow of cotton and the cross. Mansions high and cabins low and indigo. Scars and stripes, a paradise for some and not all. For God and faith we separate, with our backs to the sun, 'cause we're living beneath the shadow of cotton and the cross. coming. Roll on, Jordan, wash away all our sins. Old world's dying, new world's rising. One of these old days, these bones are gonna rise again. Oh, oh, don't mistake what I say as a judgment. In the purest sense, it represents my cry from the heart. We can't let fate steal our day. We all flow through each other. Though we're living neath the shadow, don't be driven by the shadow. Get delivered from the shadow of cotton and the cross.
Thank you, Lee. It's a beautiful song, so appropriate for today. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this presentation of the Agriculture Working Group for the Association for Baha'i Studies. We're so happy today to have a presentation from one of our reading groups. And I encourage you all to look at joining a reading group. It's such a great way to learn about some of these really complicated issues that humanity is dealing with today. And so the topic today is agriculture and the roots of American racism. In particular, it's a reading group that studied The Half Has Never Been Told by Edward Baptist. The Half Has Never Been Told, Capitalism and excuse me, let me find the topic, the subject here is Agriculture and the Roots of American Racism, A Journey Through The Half Has Never Been Told by Edward Baptist. So I just wanted to mention a little bit about our speakers today. Our speakers today are Anne and Lee, Anne Moshtael and Lee Moavenzadeh, who will be kind of introducing the topics of the day. And then after that, we'll be having some breakout groups. So we'll be having a little bit of an overview to begin with, an overview of the book The Half Has Never Been Told. And then after that, at about 1:40, we'll go into breakout groups and have some more maybe in-depth and personal discussion about some of the topics based on the chapters in the book. And then we'll meet back at around 2:10 and share some reflections on our discussions, some of our learnings. And we'll be ending today promptly at 2:30. Sometimes our meetings tend to go on and on because people enjoy the discussion so much they want to go on. But we have to stop today at 2:30 for a rather important engagement that I have to attend. And it's very relevant to the topic of the day. We're having a prayer vigil today in our community here in North Carolina, in conjunction with the NAACP and other community organizations and churches, in order to encourage our county commissioners to remove the Confederate statue, the Confederate monument that's placed in front of our courthouse here in North Carolina. So we're going to need to stop at that time pretty promptly at 2:30, so I can attend that and other members here can attend that. All right, so let's get started here. I want to introduce our first speakers today, who are Lee Moavenzadeh. And Lee asked me to not talk too much about her, but really introduce it in terms of the reading group. So the Agriculture Working Group sponsored a reading group for The Half Has Never Been Told. And so Lee was a member of that reading group, and Ann Moshtael was a member of that reading group. Lee was born in Mobile, Alabama, and but has lived here, is currently living here in North Carolina. Ann Moshtael was originally from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, has also lived here in North Carolina and currently living in Georgia, in the US. So Lee and Ann, I turn the meeting over to you.
Okay, thank you, Dawn. Can everybody hear? Okay. Can everybody hear? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
I just briefly want to mention a little bit, explain a little bit about how our reading group worked. It was a group of 8 to 9 persons last winter over Zoom, and we tackled this 400 and some page book of Dr. Baptist's The Half Has Never Been Told. And the subtitle is Slavery and the Making of American Capitalism. Dr. Edward Baptist is from Durham, North Carolina, and he is a professor of history at Cornell University up in New York. So just to mention briefly, he did 12 years of exhaustive research and presented this book back in, I believe it was 2014. Our process was that we consulted and decided that we would each take a chapter. There's only, I think, 8 or 9 chapters in the book. So we would each, either one person or 2 people, took a chapter and, you know, reflected on it, read on it, and came up with some meaningful questions for the group. So we had a Google Doc that we could post the questions on. So the group could, you know, consider the questions before our meeting if they had time and could. Our sessions were completely in the humble posture of learning. I mean, I think that to the entire group, it was very revealing and remarkable to understand this history, really world history, in ways that we were ignorant. We really didn't know. And that's part of course, the purpose of the book is to help us to see the history in more of a true, not whitewashed, not propaganda type of presentation. So we did this presentation. I mean, we did this study for about 9 weeks. Our group was essentially all whites. We were all whites, some from the South, some from, we had actually 2 people from Canada, which really made it interesting because their understanding of American history, which of course the slavery, of course, is connected with the US. This was new. This was very new to them. So that made it all the more interesting for all of us, I think, to have the input from people that may have had more of an understanding of the Native American indigenous people's sufferings. So for those of us, I mean, the title of our group was Social Justice and Agriculture. That's what attracted me to the group. I didn't know, the book, obviously beforehand. I had never heard of it, but I've always been passionate about social justice and learning more and more about the situation and the experience of our brothers and sisters of color. For us, it took us to our guardians' advice for the whites to make a supreme effort to abandon once and for all their usually inherent and at times subconscious sense of superiority when in connection with interacting with people of the Black and other colors, but particularly African Americans. Definitely this entire book would help with that process. So our reading group discovered about three, we could put this into maybe 3 things: the dark secrets of slavery, how many of these dehumanizing practices still survive in our institutions, agricultural systems, economic beliefs, and culture, and the implications for our efforts to eradicate anti-Black racism in the United States and in other predominantly white nations. As we worked through, we were invited to present at the National Conference for the Association of Baha'i Studies. So we presented a proposal, and Lee, she's so talented and using the tool, the Prezi. So the Prezi is a presentation tool, obviously, that she will show us today. And the concept that she used is one that's taken from the book, where Dr. Baptist likens the whole issue of slavery and to Gulliver's travel of the giant that was tied down. So our Prezi will have that image, and the idea was that the essence and all the injustices of the Black body being acted upon in the book has leached down into the soil. And while the slavery of old is gone, other things have grown out of that same soil, that tainted groundwater. And so the soil is in need of healing and restoration. Much can be learned, of course, from the example of Abdu'l-Baha. So please join us in our exploration of this. There's no way we can cover all the rich topics that Dr. Baptist has presented, but Lee now will take us and show us how her Prezi can help us all to explore the book. Thanks. Thank you, everybody. So Lee's gonna show us her beautiful Prezi.
Yes, thank you, Anne, for the overview, the introduction to our process. I'm really excited to share with you sort of the fruit of our efforts, recognizing, of course, that it's a daunting and impossible task. This is a massive amount of information and complexity and depravity, to be quite honest, to try and convey. And so what we're hoping to do today is just basically show you this study tool that we kind of created. We took very good notes and we tried to ask deep questions and think about the implications for our own lives. And we offer this study tool just sort of as a gift to y'all, and hopefully to encourage you to, not only interact with this book, but other resources, but to really look around at your community, the institutions in which you work and serve, and just society in general, to find where are the ways that I can be, sort of disrupt this current understanding and transform, so that we actually have a community, a world founded on justice and oneness, and not racism. So I want to make sure, I'm also really excited because I have several family members who have joined us, and I just want to do a little shout out to them and appreciation for, because they raised me right. It enabled me to at least be open to thinking about these things. So I'm very grateful that they're here actually today with us. I'm going to go over first and just talk a little bit about sort of why, it may be obvious why, but I want to re-emphasize this idea. This is a quote from Shoghi Effendi, leader in the Baha'i faith, wrote in 1938, which is around the center of the interview that inspired this book. And he says, "How great, therefore, how staggering the responsibility that must weigh upon the present generation of American believers at this early stage in their spiritual and administrative evolution, to weed out by every means in their power those faults, habits, and tendencies which they have inherited from their own nation, and to cultivate patiently and prayerfully those distinctive qualities and characteristics that are so indispensable to their effective participation in the great redemptive work of their faith." And I love this quote because we're looking not just at the roots of American racism, but really the particular role that agriculture played. And the agricultural analogies in this work are staggering and illuminating. And I think we can bring a lot to bear as folks who in various ways, work the land. We have particular insights to be able to offer and lend to this healing process. So just a little note about Prezi. For those who aren't aware, it is basically a way to put together like a slideshow information that is not linear. So this is sort of the main page of our Prezi. And I also want to give a little shout out to my young friend, Trey Kinsey, who is the artist we commissioned to draw the Gulliver image here that Anne mentioned. And it begins with the book itself is laid out into chapters that illuminate each body part. And Baptist goes into why, he chose that, but it's all hinges on this quote from Ralph Ellison from The Invisible Man. It says, "On the moral level, I propose we view the whole of American life as a drama enacted on the body of a Negro giant who, lying trussed up like Gulliver, forms the stage and the scene upon which and within which the action unfolds." So we used that quote and the organizing format of this book to put together this presentation. And what you, well, actually, I'll click on one of these so you can see. There you can see this, in this image is embedded currently over 60 slides of information. And we are not going to go through all of them today. Like I said, what we're hoping to give you is just a little taste of, an overview of this tool, and we're going to give you the link so that you can explore it on your own as well. And then we're going to break into small groups and do a little mini exploration so you have, some familiarity with it. But I just want to show you this so you can get a sense that embedded in this image is all sorts of stuff to pull up, explore, reflect on, ask yourself. And now I am going to then switch to the presentation overview. So you're not going to get to see the behind the scenes anymore. And then when we're in presentation overview, whenever you click anywhere on the image, it will, jump you to that information. So I'm going to give you a little demonstration of how the Prezi is laid out by sharing with you a few things. Now, we mentioned the book is centered around this quote from Ellison. And so each body part, actually, like if we click on feet, it will take us to chapter 1, which is about the feet. It gives us a little summary, tells us the dates that are involved, maybe explains the significance of those dates. We have some guiding questions that then if you click on, if you can't quite read, it'll take you to what were the guiding questions that we explored as we studied this chapter. And then it will, oh, shoot. And then it also looks at the legacy sort of questions around how this stuff is still with us, where it shows up in our current institutions and policies and behavior. And then there's also information for illumination, which is here is where we, because this was a group of Baha'is, we chose to pull relevant quotes from the Baha'i faith and guidance from our Baha'i institutions that have insight, and understanding for us as we tackle, these challenging issues. In Illumination, we also share other resources that may be helpful in your exploration of that concept. So I am going to, oh good, I'm doing okay. I'm trying to pace myself because there's so much, I want to share so much with you, and I know we don't have time. But hopefully you will engage with this little study tool and share with us back, some of what you've discovered, what you've learned about your own self, what you see, how you see it operating in your community, and where you're taking action to dismantle some of the stuff we're seeing. So the heart of the book is, and I apologize if you hear noise, I'm in the middle of a youth retreat, and unfortunately, I had to set up in the art room, and so I'm kicking these poor youth out of their art space while I'm giving the presentation. But the heart of the book is in the introduction, and where Baptist explains that the idea from this book really came out of an interview and a series of interviews that were done, in the 1930s through the Works Progress Administration. Going out to interview folks who had formerly been enslaved and to get firsthand accounts from them of what life was like. Now, many of these questions came from a lens, at that time, America had undergone in the evolution of slavery a period of what was called the Great Sanitizing, right? Where we had deliberate propaganda show up that sort of hid and downplayed really the worst of slavery. And now we know slavery was bad, but especially for us reading this book, came to understand it was so much worse than any of us have ever been told. So in this interview with Mr. Ivey, with the Work Progress Administration project, he was the one that coined the phrase that the half has never been told. That really, if we, what we think we know, much of it is not true, and much of it we don't even know. So the the book hinges on these three assumptions I put down here at the bottom, because every chapter tries to connect with these three assumptions that are rampant in American ideology and history that he uses this book to kind of disavow. And this is like this idea that, we have a sense that, slavery was bad, but, it was ancient history and it was only in the South, and it was, this sort of prescribed thing, and that this keeps us from seeing, the full implications for our true history. And so these are the assumptions that he tackles in this book. I think he's coming to one, that American slavery was separate from the modern economy. Two, that slavery was, kind of this anathema, it was this little side thing that happened in America and is over, and, it's done, it's gone. And three is that the worst thing that was, it just denied the enslaved peoples their liberties, their freedom, and their individual rights. Again, the violence and the torture and the extreme horror is completely left out in most historical narratives. So that is kind of a rough overview. Down here at the bottom, we have, and throughout each of the chapters, there is a timeline up here right next to the date. And one of the things that really came out is just, again, we can often have a very static view and understanding of the institution of slavery and the role it played in American history. But this book really helps us see that slavery had kind of phases, right? And it evolved and mutated in some horrific ways. But there was really sort of, the beginning of, during the colonial era of our history, it started with sort of this pre-plantation phase of slavery, where you mostly had a system of indentured servitude, right? And but then very, very quickly that moved in as tobacco, as the agricultural products, right? Our tobacco, our sugar, rice, plantations began forming and popping up, and those are very labor intensive. And so the demand for heavy labor was increased. At the same time, we've got these social things and laws being enacted, and deliberate dividing of formerly indentured servants into racial categories, and legally condemning African Americans to perpetual servitude in a unique form of American slavery here. And then I can't go into too much, but there was a major shift, and much of, I think, what we tend to learn about slavery is back in here with this sort of Eastern Coast tobacco-based agricultural enslavement. But a massive transformation happened when cotton took hold, and the frontiers began to be expanded by stealing more land and wiping out, the American Indians to get more land for this particular agricultural product, right as the Industrial Revolution took hold, and the Industrial Revolution really, was underpinned with, textiles, and the making more efficiently and faster of textiles. Oh my gosh, so much to share. But so this book, you'll see here in the timeline, the chapters of the book, it shows the time period in which they cover. And most of the book takes place after the banning of the international slave trade. So what we have happening is a morphing of the institution of slavery and the practices here in America into a domestic slave trade that is frankly just tortuous and inhumane, right? So I need to pull back because there's so much. Again, I said that I want to share with you, but I want us as well to have time in small groups now to kind of explore one of these chapters, one of these body parts, just get a feel for the kinds of information, the kinds of the principles and the ideas that it contains, and how it shows up. In particular, pay attention how it shows up in our lives currently. That was the thing that our study group was most illuminated by, was just how relevant to our lives today this discussion of this ancient practice of slavery was. So I am going to stop sharing at that point, and we're going to break out into randomly organized breakout rooms where you get a chance to explore. And I'm going to share in the chat the link to the Prezi so that you can explore, and it is a work in progress. There is a lot still left out of it. There's so much to put in there, but we did want you to be able to explore it on your own as well. Welcome back, everybody. I know that was probably short, but hopefully you did at least, it whetted your appetite for more. Hopefully, we encourage you to want to open this book and dive into these a little further. But we're going to take a few minutes and just offer each small group a chance to sort of share a thought or two on something that came up for you as you looked at the chapter. So we'll just go. I think we didn't do every chapter, but we'll go in order of chapters. So the small group who did chapter 1, Angela, that would be you. So you can share.
Okay. All right. So we had the feet, and so I was introduced to the word coffle, which I wasn't familiar with that term. But as lately was in my group, and the other couple, I've forgotten your names, the Hendersons, I think. But the thing that came to mind as she described what a coffle was the present day gentrification in cities and communities where Black people predominantly reside. And so, we don't think of that in terms, there's not a physical chain on their neck. So a coffle being a group of people connected together with chains oftentimes on their neck and their hands or feet, and just paraded through an area and moved to different, from one area to another. So it brought that picture to mind as I just think about how things have changed but not changed. And so I just found that really interesting just to see and talk about. So yeah.
Awesome. Next we had chapter 2, looked at the head.
Yeah, that was my group, and honestly, we forgot to to get a person. Would anyone like to share? I'm sorry. Would anyone like to share? Because we did have a really, really good discussion. Anybody in my group, John or Billy or Janet or Ned? See if I can get anybody. I don't know if they're maybe here. We did. Janet, you want to say anything?
Sure. Well,
Because she had a
we
lot to
looked at-
share about. Yeah, excuse me. Go ahead.
Well, because we've spent quite a lot of time in Africa, and I just recently read this passage from Ruhia Khanum comparing the African Americans to the East Africans, and then she said, "Oh, now I know why the African Americans are so warm and hospitable, and it's because that's their culture." And so, in the book, we covered a story where the person was taken from his wife and children, but he found another child and raised that child and called that child's children the names of his children. So it's to show the strength of the spirit, in the Africans that Shoghi Effendi calls the people of the eye. It's just part of their culture. When we live in Africa, we can talk about God, we can have prayers anytime. People believe, they're the people of the eye because they really believe. And so I've met several African Canadians, and I still feel that same warmth and that same love. It's their spirit, it's how they live, And I feel like slavery is something that's still, there. Like in Africa, women and girls are often slaves, even if they're not officially slaves, So there's still so much to do to remove domination and oppression and, liberate half of the world's people to be able to contribute. And even the way that we exploit small farmers, they produce so much food for billions of people, but they're paid so little. Like when you take a cup of coffee or a cup of hot chocolate or something, or what they're paid is so tiny compared to what we pay, So these things are still part, to me, like a legacy of slavery. We don't really think about how can we do fair trade and how can we pay people for planting the trees that are saving our climate now, instead of just expecting them to do it for free because they're going to get some fruits out of it someday. But, we wouldn't do that. We would expect to be paid,
Thank you, Janet.
Thank you, Janet.
Yes, thank you. Group chapter 3, the right hand.
Yeah, I also neglected to find someone to speak, but
We don't really follow directions very well, do we?
So, but Jaleh, you had some remarks on kind of the impressions you had from our discussion that maybe you might be willing to reshare. I'm not sure.
Well, my impression of the writings and the whole presentation today, I'm learning so much. My mind is being open to so much that I have never known. I mentioned when I came to this country, all I learned from the history is glorifying Lincoln, how he freed the slave, but they never said 400 years of atrocities these people suffered. They never talked about it. It's becoming very emotional for me. I can't see the films. I can't read about it that much because I don't know how in the world a human being can tolerate so much. So I do participate in different discussions in my area, and I'm hoping I can contribute by learning from here to those communities that I'm participating in. And they also don't know a lot about the history, but they need to know. That's my impression. Thank you, Amrita.
Thank you, Jaleh.
Thank you, Jaleh. Wow, really powerful reflections. Chapter 7 was about the seed.
Right, chapter 7. Sandy, did you want to say something? we also kind of cut short discussion, but wait a minute, we have to have a comment.
I could share a few things.
Okay,
Sure.
that'd be great, Richard. Thank you.
What I got from the period of time that we were able to share was that the seed was sort of used as a metaphor that was talking about the seed of masculinity of the white man and how that was superimposed on everything and everyone in terms of controlling their environment. And that includes the African slaves, and specifically using the African slaves as really as a product, if you will, something that they would sell, and no sense of respect as a human being, and even more the sale of women and the use of Black women. And then how that grew into just reinforcing their own wealth as they began the system of credit, which they also used the slaves as credit. And so it just recapitulated this experience deeper and deeper into the roots of society, and to really where it took us where we're at today, frankly.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Richard. Good synopsis. Chapter 8, blood.
I asked them if they would each, we had 3 people besides me, think of a sentence to give as feedback. It was such a rich discussion. We surely can see how a half an hour is not nearly enough. So Arthur, you want to go first?
I think that the value of turning slaves into property and just as a source of wealth is also now incorporated in the values of our corporate structure and of capitalism, where everything is property to generate wealth and other values don't count.
Thank you. Joe, do you have a sentence? No? Okay. Mark.
There are several themes. One was the materialism and inhumanism, where slaves were used like tools as if they were horses, and openly traded as tools. It was originally started, and there's a business as usual for making money. It started as an advantage in the international cotton trade. So the whole idea was to get free labor for, but whereas it did have an economic foundation, it's true that the slaves contributed to the economic development of the country, even to the point where after the Civil War, where slaves were not as available, there was an economic depression. Also, this is stretched into present day, where even the business as usual of trying to make money, the corporations or whatever, when you couldn't own a slave, they found another way to oppress people and kept going. To even today, the disparity between rich and poor is a form of oppression. That's it.
Yeah,
I do
thank
have
you,
a
Mark.
sentence. My sentence would be: global capitalism is turning all of us into slaves.
Yes. The slave economy did not leave us. Chapter 9, backs.
That was the one I did. So there was 2 of us. There was Heidi and Janine. Now of the 3 of us, the 3 of us, Janine was all 3 of us were from the West Coast. So we didn't grow up, with much experience of African Americans, but Janine moved to Tennessee. So, and this is her first time in the ag group. So Janine, could you just share your impressions or share something with us?
Yes, I found I had not read the book and I've never attended a session of this group. And for my own education, that's why I signed up to participate. And I have found it very, very interesting. I've read an awful lot of literature. I just finished The Water Dancer last week. And so I am very well aware of the issues and problems of this period of history. But what the thing that caught my attention in the discussion of the back was the development between the North and the South of a conflict over the industrialization of the North, and they're thinking that the South was, you know, inefficient and not as productive, and so this caused sort of an economic conflict between the two. So that was one key thing that I picked up on. I'm sorry I'm not more articulate about it because I haven't read the book, but I certainly plan to. This was very informative and I enjoyed it.
Super student.
Thank you.
So dear Heidi, she has a community farm, 5 acres in Washington State. And there she is on her farm out on the veranda. Here in Canada, we have snow, but what the heck? Heidi, can you share a few things?
Well, I think we spent a lot of time doing an overview of kind of the book, but what I got from the difference between the North and the South on chapter 9 was, like Janine said, how the South was viewed as maybe a little backward. He didn't use that name, but that's kind of what I heard, and that people that do labor tend to be looked down as uneducated or not sophisticated, and how that continues. You know, if you don't have a PhD or, you know, that. So that's what it really impressed me, and to see how the roots, how our history facilitated that continued view.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's a beautiful way to close out. I'm sorry we don't have more time to continue the dialogue, but I really hope that you will continue exploring the material and continue thinking about these things and the way they show up in our current behaviors and lives and things. We want to ask Cindy to please, she's going to say a prayer for us. We want to definitely hold all those beautiful human beings in Asheboro, North Carolina, in our prayers as they come together to pray, to move forward out from under the shadow of the Confederacy, to be able to move down these monuments that continue to really haunt us and keep us from moving forward into a more beautiful, unified future. So Cindy, please, you'll close us with a prayer, and thank you all so much for your participation and your just willingness to learn some new things.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, and you can also remember Gary in Ukraine in your prayer.
Yes.
In the middle of war.
Yeah, he was in our group and all of a sudden he cut out.
And
so I don't know if he lost connection. Yeah. I just wanted to say one thing is that we just looked at one little layer of what happened in this, what this book is about. One little minute layer. And there is just so much more that I'm sure you will realize that you had no clue as to what happened in our country and what is still happening in our country because of it. Anyway, here's a prayer for humanity. O thou kind Lord, thou hast created all humanity from the same stock. Thou hast decreed that all shall belong to the same household. In thy holy presence, they are all thy servants, and all mankind are sheltered beneath thy tabernacle. All have gathered together at thy table of bounty. all are illumined through the light of thy providence. O God, thou art kind to all. Thou hast provided for all, dost shelter all, conferrest life upon all. Thou hast endowed each and all with talents and faculties, and all are submerged in the ocean of thy mercy. O thou kind Lord, unite all. Let the religions agree and make the nations one, so that they may see each other as one family and the whole earth as one home. May they all live together in perfect harmony. O God, raise aloft the banner of the oneness of mankind. O God, establish the most great peace. Cement thou, O God, the hearts together. O thou kind Father, God, gladden our hearts through the fragrance of thy love. Brighten our eyes through the light of thy guidance. Delight our ears with the melody of thy word, and shelter us all in the stronghold of thy providence. Thou art the mighty and powerful. Thou art the forgiving, and thou art the one who overlooketh the shortcomings of all mankind. Abdul Baha.
Akunam tu awesa yeku ondoa shida sipokuwa Mwenyezi Mungu. Akunam tu awesa yeku ondoa shida sipokuwa Mwenyezi Mungu. Yeye ni Mwenyezi Mungu, na wote ni watumishi wake, na wote wanaishi kwa mapenzi yake, na wote wanaishi kwa mapenzi yake.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Aloha.
Aloha. Aloha.
Aloha. Thank you all. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Deuces.